Hello everyone and welcome to a new video from Your Overwatch. I'm Eddie the Chump and today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We're going to be having some fun responding to some of your guys' comments. Now I'm not just going to be negative, this isn't an us versus you situation, but I will be unpacking of what we can see as either misconceptions or common thought patterns that can trap people into believing something is true when it's not. Hopefully by doing this we can reach some teachable moments together while also poking a little fun at ourselves at the same time. Sound good? Good. Alright, let's begin. So the first comment I want to respond to is from a viewer called Jared Martin, and in it, he laments that in his opinion, Moira should be nerfed, or more surprisingly, deleted from the game entirely because she's very annoying to play against as Tracer or Genji, and that if you don't get the jump on a good Moira, you might as well switch. Now this is something I can relate to because it might surprise you, but I'm not that great at Tracer. Alright, you're probably not surprised, but at least act like it. And Moira does have mechanics in her kit that allows her to evade and possibly kill a weaker Tracer player. Auto-aim damage from a range you might not expect that heals her while you're dueling, damage orbs, healing orbs, etc. However, here is what I think is the truth. If you play Tracer regularly and you're really struggling to kill a Moira consistently 1v1, that might mean that your aim is not where it needs to be, because good Tracers don't struggle in that matchup. Genji is a slightly different case, that matchup is harder for him overall, but still, a skilled DPS playing either would win that 1v1 duel more times than not. Which means it's less of an issue with the hero and more a question of needing to be more honest with oneself about one's own skill level. Context is important too. For example, it drives me mental when I'm warming up in DM and there's like 5 Moiras all trying to damage orb steal a limbs from duels they're not even in across the map. In those games, language and insults fly from my lips with such ferocity and frequency it'd make gangster rappers blush. But outside of my own personal apocalypse, I know that my tracking is not good enough to play Tracer regularly, and part of the way I know that is precisely because I struggle in matchups like these, whereas better players don't. In fact, the state of Moira as a character isn't what I would call great. Outside of a few exceptions in triple tank, triple heal, she's not widely considered to be very good at the upper levels of the game. At lower ranks, she can take advantage of weaker mechanical players and seem way too strong, but that says more about us as players than it does the hero itself. So no, Moira doesn't need nerfing or removing from the game, we just need to get good, myself included. So the next comment we're going to address comes from a user called Sai Row 3, who echoes a sentiment we see quite often in our comment section, and that is that it's nice to hear what we think will happen to the pro scene and how the Overwatch League will be affected when balance changes come through, but as the vast majority of our viewers are in fact not pros, although some other comments suggest to me some people might think that they are, just saying, why don't we focus on the biggest band of players, say from bronze up to diamond, and how changes will impact them more often? Well, firstly, in response to that, I think we do actually talk about how changes affect different levels quite often. One notable example that happened very recently was when FREEDO discussed the buff to Reaper and how at lower ranks there is a fear that he could take over the game somewhat, and how actually this kind of in case of GOAT smash the buff button response from Blizzard isn't quite what's needed. Hero bans. I understand why people might get the impression we're more focused on higher level implications of changes than at lower levels sometimes, but the truth is we do talk about the multiple meta problem regularly. The game is astoundingly different at say Plat versus GM, to such an extent they're often not very comparable. Any lower than Plat, and I would argue a lot of what applies to organized top level Overwatch doesn't really apply at all, but the point is that what changes at the very top does eventually trickle down a long way in some form or another, maybe not the bottom 3 ranks so much, but for instance, it mattered to many players when Hanzo got his rework, and what was very quickly optimized up at the top became a part of the ranked experience for pretty much everyone. Graviton Dragon Strike combos were everywhere. We do think top-down balancing is generally the best idea for the game, but we do also try and raise a lower rank issue whenever it becomes obviously relevant, like the Reaper buffs and how good Bastion is at the moment. We wouldn't make those how to counter videos if we didn't think a lot of people would want to know. Speaking of which, this next comment is actually from a Bastion video, and it comes from a user called Ons. In it, he says that our whole avoid the Bastion approach doesn't work on every map, and that we should try this on Junkertown first point defense. Apparently diving a Bastion is better. Okay, let's get this out there. People sometimes complain that some of our advice isn't relevant to them because it's centered around team play aspects of the game, and that in matches a lot of our viewers are in, that is largely absent. But answer this little riddle I have for you, dear viewer. What do you think takes more teamwork? Avoiding a Bastion line of sight until you can get off angles around the shield protecting him, or orchestrating a full dive straight at him? You can outplay a pirate ship with dive, pros could do it, but the team play required to go in with Winston, D.Va and flanker DPS versus that amount of raw damage, shielding, health and damage amp pockets is insanely difficult to pull off. Winston's bubble will evaporate, defense matrix can save you for up to 2 seconds, but after that you had better hope that the Bastion is dead, because if he isn't, you're as good as feeding. People mention Sombra 2 as a counter, and a hack on a Bastion would definitely be advantageous, but Sombra is a team play hero. Part of the reason her pick rate is so low is precisely because most players in random teams struggle to coordinate with her hacks properly. To dive a Bastion, there's so many rules you have to follow to stand a chance of pulling it off, it's prohibitive to most players in the random teams of ranked. By simply avoiding his line of sight and giving up a bit of cart until you can CC him with something like sleep or hog hook, you're only having to follow one rule, and that's don't peek the death cannon robot and feed. And yes, actually, on Junkertown first point defense, there are plenty of places to hide in and then pounce from with crowd control. Top level players in ranked will often try to not even let Bastion out of the door to get to cart in the first place, playing a very aggressive spawn trap defense instead. Honestly, I think the reticence to just hide is symptomatic of a larger problem some ranked players have, and that is that they find it impossible not to peek at all times, but that's a topic for another occasion. Next up, we have a comment from a user called Joran. In it, they dispute an assertion we made about the common assumption of Zarya countering D.Va being a myth. They say Zarya's beam goes through defense matrix, that's countering her, surely, right? Well, here's where I say, up until her recent defense matrix nerf, and possibly even beyond that, there is no counter to D.Va. She is one of the very strongest heroes in the entire game, and the sheer amount of potential value in her kit has seen her be a virtual must pick at the pro level and below for a very long time. You think Mercy was meta for ages? Well, D.Va arguably never hasn't been, depending on what level you're talking about. If a D.Va player understands the character and more crucially how the game actually works, as in their game sense is quite high, D.Va can do absolutely everything. She can stop her team from dying, peel for her supports, dual DPS, eat huge value ultimates like Grav, and wipe teams with bomb in and out of ult combos. She's a big part of why Goats is so strong, she enables Winston in dive, the list continues. She's the only hero that has an ability that can eat infinite damage for a period of time. People think Brig can do everything, and she can, but D.Va can do more. Saying Zarya's beam counters her is like saying Ashe kills McCree. You'd have to be an idiot to think that, right guys? Right? Anyway, Zarya's beam can go through defense matrix, but D.Va can fly. She can play outside of the beam's range at virtually any moment of her choosing. Zarya has to brawl to get value, D.Va doesn't. A bad D.Va is easy to demech with a high Zarya charge, sure, but a good one? Nah, that's not really gonna happen. Good D.Va play waits for punish opportunities safely using mobility and defense matrix. The whole point of mobility is that you can choose when to be fighting and when not to. Zarya's beam won't trouble you as D.Va if you're waiting safely until you see an exploitable gap out of Zarya's range. Bad D.Vas might seem easy to kill with Zarya because they're doing their version of that whole having to fight forever tendency I spoke about earlier in the Bastion segment, but good D.Vas aren't nearly as careless as that. This is the problem with looking at hero matchups in isolation. The game just doesn't work that way. A similar misconception is that Zarya counters Junkrat because his spam gives her charge. Well yeah, but Junkrat spams chokes and eats Zarya Rhine comps all day long, especially if you don't have a Lucio, which is very common outside the highest ranks. You might have charge for a bit, but it's no good if your main tank keeps dying instantly. You know who does deal with Junkrat? That's right, D.Va. To finish up the video, I'm going to briefly cover my favourite comment in the last month, and it comes from a user called Vid. It simply says about ranking up, people should just stop dying, then they will climb. Never has a truer word been said. What this comment does is take all our efforts into making videos about ranking up and distill it into a perfect phrase. It's almost poetry. You cannot deny the logic. If you and your team don't ever die, you will rank up because you'll never lose. Now that might sound a bit facetious, but it's honestly something we do say for a good reason. What we actually say is get kills, don't die. What we mean by that is sometimes Overwatch ranked makes no sense. The comp is all wonky, there's 5 DPS, nobody is in voice, etc. Trying to force actual Overwatch onto that environment is a recipe for hair loss. I should know, my many descents into platinum and out again have left me balder than the Rock's left thumb. In those scenarios, it really is about just deathmatching better than the enemy team. So, get kills, try not to die. Otherwise you'll be like the guy in the middle of an insane asylum screaming, "This is all madness." Well yeah, Duh. As I said at the beginning of the video, we're trying something a little bit new today. I really do hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please don't forget to leave a rating so we know to do more. If you never want to miss another video of ours again, please click the bell icon next to the subscribe button on our channel to join the notification squad. You'll be in great company. And finally, please follow the Your Overwatch Twitter. It's where you can find updates about new videos and other cool stuff. I've been Eddie the Chump, and until next time.